Look, quick, for those on the call, quick bit of orientation. Most of the participants today are lawyers from, of one stripe or another, either from in-house or from firms. So, and obviously that's kind of germane to the topic. Order of operations, I am going to give Peter Connor the floor for probably about the first half, so about 30 minutes, and then in the second half, I'll discuss a few points myself. So that's just kind of order of operations. We need to let Peter go at about the half-hour mark, but we will leave a bit of time for questions because I think there will be some. So just keep that in mind. It'll go Peter for about 20 minutes, and then some questions, and then me for about 20 minutes and some questions. That's just order of operations. If you have a question, just type it on into the chat in this webinar, and I will pick it up. If we happen not to get to them, you'll see our emails as you go, and so of course post facto is fine as well. So really quick, Peter, if it's okay with you, I'll maybe just make a quick introduction to you, and if there's anything there that you particularly want to add, because I know there's quite a lot of great detail in your bio, you know, please feel free to add. But folks, for those who don't already know Peter and his work, Peter has over 25 years of legal, compliance, and business experience, ranging from some of the biggest multinational IT companies where he's held compliance leadership roles and general counsel roles, large international law firms. And he's worked in an impressive array of points in the world: Hong Kong, Switzerland, England, an island called Australia, and Silicon Valley too. So now CEO of AlternativelyLegal, which specializes actually a large part in the content that we're going to cover, although briefly today in this webinar. So you'll have a chance to see how to get in touch with Peter as we go. But I think with that, Peter, welcome. Maybe I can kind of cue you up and tee you up just with this question, and then I'll let you go. The T-shaped lawyer is a real theme and a strong feature of your work, but there will be some folks on the call today that don't know what that is. Do you mind maybe just sort of doing a bit of backdrop and starting from that entry point?
Yeah, sure, Kevin, and thanks for the invitation, Kevin, from Sage to join you on this event. It's a pleasure to be here. And hi, everybody. I can't see you all, but I hope you're all having fun, and I think this will be a good conversation. So we're going to talk. Let me start before I get to answer your question directly. Perhaps I can start by saying that there's a lot of talk in the legal industry about transformation, innovation, transformation. And when you Google, for example, legal transformation, what you come up with, all of the responses are pretty much typically digital transformation. And whilst that's important, I think something that's overlooked a lot is the topic of what I call human transformation, which I believe at the end of the day is pretty important. It's kind of what you do and what you're capable of doing as a lawyer. And so, yes, there's a lot of change going on in processes and systems, but frankly, not that much change happening in terms of lawyers and what they do and what they're capable of doing. So we're going to focus, that's what, as Kevin said, that's what I've been focused on for the last 5 years with my business, and it's what we're going to talk about today. So let me first start by maybe making you aware that, these days, it's now pretty much beyond contention that as a lawyer, you need to focus on more than your technical legal skills and knowledge. And although I've been saying that for well over 5 or 6 years now, there's now a lot of much more support for that idea, including, for example, this study in the US of 24,000 lawyers who were asked, what do they need to be successful now and in the future? And as you can see, what they're saying here is that legal technical skills actually make up a relatively small proportion of what it takes to be successful. And that other things, which they call in this study competencies and characteristics, which are basically non-legal skills and knowledge, are actually more important. And if that were not enough, what we're seeing is the development in the last few years of different frameworks. And by a framework, I mean a structured approach to non-legal training and development. Without these frameworks, the problem is that most lawyers then just pick and choose a particular skill or develop, or competency, and it doesn't really necessarily help them. So having a framework gives you a holistic view of all the things you need to put in place. And so here's one framework out of the UK, which is called the O-shaped lawyer program. It's primarily focused at lawyers coming out of university, or should I say law students coming out of university who then entering the workforce. And it's primarily focused on the way in which law firms engage with in-house legal teams. But they're trying to set up a framework to help lawyers develop a range of competencies and qualities that will help address and develop a well-rounded, an O-shaped lawyer. And there's another model in the US called the Delta model, which has been created by some prominent US academics. And it, as you can see, only one of the three sides of this model are focused on legal, the typical legal practice areas. And the other areas are around people and process. And things like business development, for example, are definitely part of those other two areas. And you can see, so this is basically validation that, in case you weren't aware of it, that the legal industry is shifting now and recognizing it's not just about the law anymore. Okay, so that's a bit of background before we get into the T. So to answer Kevin's question about the T-shaped professional, let me start by saying the T-shaped professional, by the way, doesn't come from the legal world, it comes from the business world. And it was created and devised a few years ago to describe the problem, if you will, that most professionals, whether they're lawyers, accountants, engineers, HR people, whatever, are very I-shaped in the sense that they have a very deep expertise in one area, in lawyers' case, the law, but frankly, very limited expertise and skill set beyond that. Why is that a problem? Well, it wasn't in a world where everyone worked in silos, and that was fine, but increasingly, people are working in teams, and there's increasing collaboration between law firms and clients, for example, where you need to be interacting with your clients or even within the firm with a range of non-legal professionals, not just lawyers, in order to get things done and to change things. And so in order to be competent at doing that, in order to collaborate and in order to innovate for the organization and your clients as a whole, it becomes important to develop a range of skills, knowledge, and competencies beyond your core area of expertise. Not to be an expert in these areas, but at least to have some level of general understanding. And so the T-shaped lawyer framework that I put together, and in fact, I'm rolling this out with one of Kevin and my joint clients, Raja and Tan in Asia, is a framework that recognizes that legal skills and knowledge will still remain the fundamental core of what lawyers need to focus on. But there's actually a range of other skills, and it's not just skills. That's the other thing. Most people talk about soft skills. Well, first of all, they're not soft. I think these skills are anything but soft. I like to call them power skills. So soft suggests that they're sort of optional or not very important, but they are crucially important. So there's a range of skills, and business development would fall into that category of non-legal skills. And then there's competencies, knowledge, qualities, and mindsets.
So I remember when I saw this first, and that stack, that sort of colored layer cake. By the way, Peter, we have a quay here. It's like a cake, a Malay cake that looks just like that. So
Little piece.
yeah, people are. people are recognizing something about your model here. But when I remember when we first spoke, one of the first times we spoke, and I saw this, it intuitively made so much sense for business development, which is, you know, our area of expertise, in that it's going to transcend through all of those layers. This thing that we call business development shows up in those other areas like mindsets, qualities, knowledge, competencies, etc., not just skills. Maybe I just wonder, can you say a little bit more about why that isn't just a uniform bar that just says skills, and how you develop those layers there?
Right. Yeah, thanks, Kevin. And I agree entirely. So the reason is because skills are, you know, there's a difference between each of these horizontal layers, and they all play a different role in the framework. They're all very important, but they play a different role. So skills are things like business development, like project management, which you can go and learn and more or less go and apply that. You know, you may not be an expert, but you can apply those skills in your work and you can produce outcomes pretty much straight away. Whereas competencies are different. They're things like communication, networking, that kind of thing, where they don't of themselves necessarily produce outcomes, but they're very important to supplement and reinforce skills. And so they play a different role, an important role, but a different role. Knowledge, of course, it's no longer just about legal knowledge. So in the area of business development, obviously, business knowledge becomes pretty important. That's business in general and business in particular in relation to your clients. And there's lots of other categories of knowledge there. And qualities, again, you know, they're human attributes like empathy, those sorts of things, which again of themselves won't necessarily translate into outcomes, but are very important parts and reinforce and enhance certain competencies and skills. And then last, but by no means least, is mindsets. And mindsets are what are referred to often as the psychological foundation of reskilling. In fact, the suggestion is that, you know, you can spend a lot of time training on skills, but if you don't have the right mindset, then you're going to get limited, you know, effect from your training, you know, focusing on skills. You've got to have the right mindset. And there's a number of mindsets that I cover in the framework. So yeah, that's how they all sort of work together.
So, I mean, really interesting stuff. Obviously, once you start to fill that in, there's a lot of different kinds of skills. We're focused on BD today, I mean, for the purpose of this conversation, but clearly there would be other things like personnel management and, you know, technical literacy, yep, and so forth. Maybe just, you know, given the wealth of experience you have and the time that you've spent focusing on this framework, where does BD sort of stack, you know, I guess up and against some of those other kinds of skills, competencies, and knowledge?
Right. Yeah, good question. Well, I would say BD, which of course is relevant to those working in a law firm, but not necessarily to those working in-house. I do a lot of work with in-house legal teams, and for them, it's a different, slightly different skill that they need. And I refer to that as business partnering. But you know, business development is obviously absolutely fundamental. So just like business partnering is crucial to an in-house lawyer, business development is so crucial, one of the most crucial skills, non-legal skills for a lawyer working in a law firm. Because at the end of the day, you're working in a business. And it's not just about being a great lawyer. It's about, you know, for that business to thrive and survive and thrive, it needs to retain clients, it needs to attract new clients, bring in new work. That's at the very heart of the business. And yes, you know, these days, a lot of firms have business development professionals, but it's not like you can or should abdicate responsibility for that to those professionals. Why? Because often they're not in the room at the time when you're having a conversation with someone, and you know, you have an opportunity arises. You need to be able to identify and exploit that opportunity, and to some extent, maybe turn that into an opportunity yourself, or at least recognize when the right time to bring a professional, in to help close the deal, so to speak. So it's absolutely fundamental. I would say the most fundamental of all the non-legal skills for someone working in a law firm.
Yeah, totally resounds, echoes with my experience as well. In particular, by the way, this comment that BD is not the thing that just happens at the pitch or the proposal, by the BD professional. It's actually a continuous, ongoing set of, competency. It's a competency that you manifest almost every time you're engaging a prospect or a customer.
That's right.
Well, I want to be mindful of the time that we have with you and make sure that we give people time to submit questions via chat. So just a reminder to those who are here, if you have some questions that you'd like to hear Peter discuss now, you can just fire them into the chat and we'll bring them up. One of the things I wanted to make a little time for too, though, Peter, is you were general counsel for a significant portion of your career. And a lot of the folks who are on this call, I know, are actually interfacing with general counsel. That's their key client that sits across the table from them, or maybe prospective client. I guess thinking again from this set of skills and competencies that are BD, and knowing that the recipient of those skills and competencies, or that counterparty, is general counsel so frequently. Do you have advice to sort of share, or perspective to share on that engagement?
Yeah, I do, Kevin. And perhaps I can start by saying, so I do a lot of work. In fact, most of my work is with in-house legal teams, although I'm doing more and more with law firms recently. So pretty much every GC, or certainly many of them, and not just GCs, most sort of lawyers tell me, and I guess it's consistent with my own experience, is that, what they find, they're frustrated, I guess, by a number of things. One of which is they're frustrated that they feel that, and this is generalizing, of course, doesn't apply to everybody, but they feel that law firms, lawyers working in law firms don't really understand their business. And by that, they mean they don't understand the business of the organization that the GC is working in well enough, and they don't understand the business of the GC running his legal department. And I don't know if you know this, guys, but legal operations is like one of the biggest things in in-house legal departments. It's one of the biggest, hottest developments. And by legal operations, I mean the idea of how to run a legal department more efficiently and reduce costs and that kind of thing. So clearly, if lawyers working in law firms could understand the business better and show that, and understand the business of the organization, the business of running a legal department better, then that provides other ways for other angles, if you will, from a business development point of view, to have conversation and see if you can help your clients out, rather than just focusing on the law and how good you are as a lawyer, and how, hey, here's the latest legal update, which, by the way, is the other frustration that GCs have and lawyers have, is that they tend to get the same thing from all firms, which are updates on the law. And, and it's like they get that from 7-10 different people. And yep, some of them might be slightly better and whatever, but that's it. There's no differentiation. There's no customization to their particular situation. It's generic. And so being clever about that and trying to differentiate yourself around that stuff, and not just focusing on the law, remember, this is the whole point. It's thinking about it in a broader context. Are ways in which I suggest you think about business development. You'll be more successful if you do.
Very, very effective. I mean, one of the things that I can tell you from the experience of coaching people in business development in various lines of work, one of the hardest things to do is to get the client perspective. because you have to draw it out with very effective questions, and you don't always know. And say a situation like you were describing, they may just feel so chuffed and so excited about their legal update, you know, and they don't realize they're in queue with a dozen other equally boring updates. But so effective, I think, to be able to hear it from the recipient's perspective.
Yeah, definitely.
Peter, I wanted to say thank you, especially because we know you have a tight timeline for giving us your time, giving us your thoughts. If people want to read more of the things that you've written, kind of learn more about you or connect with you, can you maybe just give guidance as to how you're best found?
Yeah, sure. So thanks, Kevin. So I've got on the screen my email address, peter.connor@alternativelylegal.com. It's quite a mouthful, but it's easier to write than it is to say. And then, of course, you can find me on LinkedIn, Peter, C-O-N-N-O-R, not E-R. And feel free to connect, and love to meet you and to talk to you about this stuff if you're interested.
I am just going to set up to tackle the second portion of this webinar, which is to drill in a little bit on BD specifically and give guidance on a couple of practical ways that you can actually start building some of the skills that Peter was referencing within his framework. So if you bear with me a moment, I'm just going to draw up a couple of screens. So there are two things that I'm going to suggest for you to look at. There are many things that we want to cover and suggest, but with the limitations of this webinar, there's two things I'm going to focus on. One is called a quarterly pipeline review, and the other is a meeting review. And we're recommending those two things because they're very easy to begin. You don't need existing expertise, you don't need special systems, you don't need high quality advisors to get going on either of those two things. So that's the reason we suggest them. And the first one I'm going to suggest is a quarterly pipeline review. And just before I pull this image up to show you, let me just describe what that is. A quarterly pipeline review is a meeting between colleagues, and that meeting has a very specific objective, which is to keep track of the priorities that you have in your business development efforts. So say consolidate and look at all the different business development initiatives that you're taking, and review all of the opportunities that are maturing and matriculating for you as a team or as an individual or as a firm, and go through and creatively problem solve what needs to happen next, and what is the status of all those opportunities. So let me give you a look at what that looks like here. Here we are. So the discussion that happens in a quarterly pipeline review usually needs to happen over a data set, or it must happen over a data set rather. And for purposes of illustration, I'm sharing a very simple data set. So we've just created this on a simple Excel page. And we did that deliberately in order to show you how easy it can be. You don't need to pay for an expensive system with beautiful, you know, sort of Pantone values and so forth. You can actually do this very quickly, just to begin the habit and the discipline of a quarterly pipeline review. And so let me just dig in here and kind of orient you to what's in front of you. Here we lay out all the different opportunities that we have as a team. So this is this column D here. And what we're doing is we're attaching the client name to a specific opportunity name. And the reason why we don't just list the client is it could be that at a given client, you might have 2 or 3 opportunities simultaneously developing. So here we have the client name, the opportunity name, and the first step in a quarterly review is to make sure that you have all of those opportunities listed. So the very first thing is to make sure that you aren't missing any opportunities. You know, maybe John has been cultivating an opportunity with Keppel Corporation and it's not here, we want it here. And that's the first thing that you do in these meetings, is ensure completeness. Then we have this column here, which is total value, which is the total contract value. And I understand, we know that in the legal profession in particular, it might not be easy to get a perfect value because perhaps you're signing for billing hours and you're not sure how those will evolve, but you do your best to assign the value here. Win probability, which I'm going to come back to after a little while, and I'll explain how you fill that in, why that's so important when we do quarterly pipeline reviews. And then creation date. This is the first date that an opportunity is added to the list. That turns out to be very valuable later on, and it's critical not to change that. So that's an objective fact. Close date is actually not so objective a fact. It's our estimate for when we think an opportunity will close. And I'm gonna explain that one just a little bit too, because that one's quite important. And then finally here, and I'll leave the other two for a little later, but status. So I said the first thing you do is you make sure that all the opportunities are listed and that you're not missing anything. And the second thing that we do is we look at status. So here we only have 3 types of status: open, closed won, and closed lost. When we coach teams to sit down and do quarterly pipeline reviews, it's critical that they keep track of which opportunities are open, and that just means they're still evolving, they're still a work in progress, and which ones have closed, whether they've closed because you lost the opportunity or whether it's closed because you won the opportunity. And so that's why here, just by way of our quick example page, we have 3 at the bottom that are closed, lost, and we mark them that way, and we want to see them there so that we keep track of that. A little more on that later, but step 1, list all your opportunities. Step 2, make sure that you have the status up to date on all of them in your meeting. When we look at creation date, now I wanted to go back to this one. Creation date works together with close date to teach you something as a team about how you work on opportunities, how long it takes you to develop opportunities, and what we call the sales cycle, how long your sales cycle is. And over time, when you move on from, say, the 8 that we've illustrated here, and maybe there's 100 opportunities, you have a great resource to look yourself in the mirror and say, wow, look, as a firm, the shortest deal cycle we ever have is 3 weeks, and the longest one we have is 3 years. That's a big range. And on average, it takes us a year and a half. It's tremendous information to know as you build individuals and teams business development skills, is understanding what are the benchmarks, how do we typically perform. And so creation date is essential, and it shows you how long the opportunity has been there, and it can be held against close date so that you know how long do we expect these opportunities to take in general, or maybe in specific for certain opportunities. I want to speak briefly about win probability. This is the one area that people can get a little caught up and maybe confused. And so I want to make sure that as we introduce this idea, win probabilities are given a little bit of time and attention here. So what you do when you're doing a quarterly pipeline review is you set an expected likelihood or probability that a given deal or a given opportunity will close. And that's a bit of a difficult task. You don't always know for certain, but you still want to maintain a certain amount of discipline around it. We coach clients on how to get that as precise as possible. For the purpose of this webinar, I think what I'll say is begin doing this, estimate as closely as you can, and see if you can make it a point of discussion. So as you're reviewing as a team, win probability is one of the great places where you begin to convert from just listing simple facts, such as how many opportunities do we have, what status are they, and how much are they worth, to win probability, which is where you really begin to problem solve. So I'll illustrate here maybe with this first one, Alpha Corp, where there's a trade agreement and maybe our team is looking to do this $15,000 worth of work for them. We've set it at 50%. We think it's as likely as not that it will come to us. It's the job of your colleagues in a quarterly pipeline review to say, well, why is it 50%? Don't you think it should be 25%? Don't you think you're a little rosy glassed when you think about this opportunity, Kevin? Couldn't we bring that back a little bit? Or maybe, why is it only 50%? I don't see why we couldn't increase that to 75%. We're in a much stronger position than maybe you're giving us credit for. So win probability is a very effective start point to begin a problem-solving discussion. What comes after that is, what could we do as a team to change that probability in our favor? And so it may be something as simple as, well, maybe we need to send them a more comprehensive list of our capabilities and our track record, our past work in this specific area. Maybe somebody needs to take the managing director of that of Alpha Corp out for dinner and have a more comprehensive listening session with her, and so forth. This is actually where the great evolution of business development starts to happen, so that some of those senior lawyers in your firm that are naturally very instinctive and good and great at taking next steps begin to share openly with more junior lawyers or other lawyers, what would I do to change our likelihood for this given opportunity? Or like I said initially, it could be that you actually use this column, this win probability, to adjust down. And this is the magic of the quarterly pipeline review, is that it's a structured way to make sure that colleagues are discussing constructively what needs to happen next in order to mature a given opportunity. The value of that is that if it happens quarterly, the patterns begin to emerge, and those who don't feel like they're naturally especially competent at BD start to pick up on the discussion and the actions, exactly how to get better, and very specific tactics that work, or eliminating tactics that don't work, for that matter. Another thing that I want to illustrate about the quarterly pipeline reviews, and then I'm going to take a quick break and we're going to make a transition to our second suggestion. But this is also a time when you can do some analysis on your team and yourself in business development. So one of the things we specifically have outlined on purpose here is this closed lost, and to a certain extent also closed won, but closed lost is the real special category here. We include them because these are all of the opportunities that give you, I call it looking in the mirror, they give you a chance to assess objectively or somewhat objectively, what is it that makes us win and what is it that makes us lose? And when you do a quarterly pipeline review, it isn't only about what's the next opportunity coming up and what do we have to do to get it. It's a great moment to say, look, Hotel Holdings, that mediation opportunity that we had was of a decent size, $60,000. It came up, it took us almost a year to discuss and try to win, and we lost it. And here's what I think happened with that opportunity. Here's what I think happened with Hotel Holdings. Here's why I think we lost. And those are not, just to be clear, in case it's needed, it's not a blame, that's not a blaming session. It's constructively thinking through what is it that makes us win deals and what is it that makes us lose deals, and can we make the adjustments required to change our ratio. One of the lessons that we have, for example, as a business ourselves, is that certain opportunities never needed to be pursued in the first place. So one thing you can learn with your closed lost category is that you never should have really been seriously pursuing them as an opportunity. It should have been disqualified much earlier in the process. What I'd like to share now is meeting review. And I love sharing this because it's immediately accessible. There's nothing that you have to do. There's no software you need to install. There's plenty of opportunity to get going on this straight away. And I love it because we frequently talk with our clients and work with them on the premise that they are very high performing professionals. And there's another category of high performing professionals, which are athletes. And when you look at that extremely competitive world that athletes occupy, they will break down their work into very minute areas of improvement. And they do what they sometimes call reviewing tape. So they look at their past games and they say, you know, what was my footwork like? What was my court placement? How was I handling, you know, the bat or my equipment or my hockey stick and so forth? These people are very, very focused on doing an excellent job of reviewing their own activity. And that's part of what makes them so incredibly effective and incredibly competitive. There is nothing about a baseball player's life and work that is anything less than that of a lawyer in terms of its meaning, its importance, its value to society. And we teach this meeting review because it's the same thing as reviewing game tape. And it's immediately available to you. So our challenge is this: you should dedicate 10 minutes to reviewing every single client meeting for the rest of your career. And so that sounds quite extreme, but we mean it. You have the time, you have the wherewithal. And when you think about who becomes great at BD, it's actually the folks who are capable of doing this. No matter how native their skills are at the outset, when they do this, they get better. So we're going to share with you then what we call the 10-minute meeting review. And we really mean 10 minutes. It can usually be done in even less. The step one is that you huddle up with your team immediately after the meeting. That's a critical step. So if that's a Zoom call, you finish that call, you jump on another call, review immediately. The first step in that review is, what were the objectives we had for this meeting with this client, and did we reach them? And if you're great at objective setting, those should be easy yes, no answers rather than debates about whether you met those objectives. But that's the first thing that you do, is say, did we reach the objectives? The second thing, of course, is usually with a client or a prospective client, a lot of different things have been discussed. There may have been opportunities that come up, or you commit to follow up, or you're going to share more information. And now's the time where you review all of what we call action items and to-dos. Who needs to send what? Who needs to share what? Did the client promise to do anything? Have we made note of it? Do we need to file any documents? Do we need to set any meetings or deadlines? So that's the second step in this 10-minute meeting review. Step 4, score your personal meeting performance. So this is something that's done privately. It's an area where you want to be neither harsh with yourself nor too generous with yourself. So our challenge here is be honest. And the system that I like best is the 10-point scale. How do I think I did in there? I thought it was about a 6.5 today in that meeting. And that's a very vague approach, but it's very effective because in my experience coaching professionals through business development, they always can reach a number for themselves. And then they can figure out why they gave themselves that number. So if I say it's 6.5, then I can answer, where did 3.5 points go? Where did I lose 3.5 points? So you score yourself in your personal meeting performance, and you can do so with step 5. And this is our framework for how professionals get better, specifically in client meetings. You review mechanics, content, and style. So these are the steps. They take easily just 10 minutes, frequently less. But if you develop this practice, you discover that no matter how organically wonderful a BD professional you are or not, you start getting considerably better in your business development skills when in the field. So looking at mechanics, content, and style, what does that mean, and how can you get more precise than, hey, I thought I was a 6.5 in there out of 10? Mechanics are those things in a meeting that are sort of hard logistical items. So this is what's happening in the ambiance and the environment of the room. It's what happens with equipment and technology. It's what happens logistically. And so to give you a few examples of the kinds of things you might pick off, maybe we had a client lunch and there was a high-pitched whine in the background from some refrigerator, and it was really distracting. It's something to note, and that it seems like minutia, but again, we're reviewing game tape. And when you get in this habit of saying that's what happened in there from a mechanical perspective, then you don't choose that table again, or you don't choose that restaurant again, or you're aware that it affects your performance as a professional who works with clients. No stupid refrigerators whining and distracting you. The meeting started 12 minutes late when the client arrived. Simple point of fact. Logistical issue, 12 minutes late. The food was delicious and we should take more clients there. Simple logistical, environmental fact, this restaurant has amazing steaks. John, were seated beside the CEO and I was across from her. So this is something that we frequently cover, and anybody who's been a professional even for a while realizes the where you sit and what kind of table you're sitting at does matter. And this is the kind of moment where you get better at that. And if you think about some of the junior attorneys in your firm, this is the kind of review that will give them the opportunity to say, okay, there's a way to optimize the seating at a table and so forth. That's mechanics. The next category that we talk about, and again, we do this very quickly, right? So these things happen quickly and you'll get accustomed to talking about mechanics, content, style. The next one is content. And this is what is communicated. So this is the subject matter. We talk about topics, specific quotations, specific statements that were shared, sometimes the hard materials that are shared, which content was delivered. Examples of this could be things like, you said our firm was founded in 1998, but it was actually founded in 1994. Factual inaccuracy, it's not a big deal, but let's clean that one up and not make that mistake again. We had 3 items on our agenda that didn't seem to have anything to do with what the client actually wanted to discuss. So here we're talking about content again. Your story about our new wafer design really nailed the point on our focus on delivering ROI. This is a great moment in reviewing. So thinking about BD skills, many of the best business development professionals are great storytellers. And the way that their stories develop is that they take account of which ones work and which ones don't, which aspects of the story work and don't. And your 10-minute meeting review is the moment for you or colleagues to validate the quality of the stories or the anecdotes, the cases that you illustrate. Finally, style. So here, we're just thinking about how content is communicated. So everybody knows that what you say can be colored significantly by how it is said. And this is a great moment as a team to give really constructive feedback and constructive guidance to one another on how they come across. So maybe your content was excellent, but you delivered it where you were sort of staring at your soup. And so no matter how good the content was, the delivery, hurt you. Or this is where we see something that we call audio share. Did somebody sort of hog the conversation and they spoke the most, and somebody not enough, and so forth. So this is, again, style. And when we do our 10-minute meeting review, we go through, we score ourselves, say I'm a 6.5 out of 10, and then you can dig into, well, what were the mechanics of that meeting? What wasn't satisfactory on a mechanics basis? And what about, by way of content, was there any area where I'd kind of maybe take a point or two off of myself, and I'd like to see myself do that differently next time? And then finally, style. So what we encourage you to do is take these 2 skills. One is a quarterly pipeline review. Use that opportunity to be the place where not only you keep organized and develop the hard business development opportunities and see them grow and matriculate and mature and set all your next steps, but it's also the place where you reflect on what's working for you as an individual, what isn't working for you, what's working for you as a team, what isn't working for you. That's the quarterly pipeline review. The other discipline is what we've just been speaking about, a 10-minute meeting review. And it's something that you'll have to develop as a practice, as a business discipline, but you'll see immediately once you start that, you get lift in the professionals that participate, and they become immediately better. Even if it's in small ways, those small ways aggregate, and suddenly young attorneys who are just being expected to bring in business start really sharpening their skills. And fortunately, it takes no extra time, training, or practice. It's just reviewing game tape. We're gonna leave it there. Thanks very much for attending. We'll let you get out early to finish your lunch. If you would like to get in touch with Sage, you can find us at sage.exchange. If you'd like to get in touch with me, I'm at kevin@sage.exchange, and you can also find us on LinkedIn. Thanks, everybody, and we'll record and share this with you so that for those who didn't attend, or if you wanted to share this, it will be up on our website in about 24 hours. Okay, thanks, everybody. Take care.